influence. But yeah, we've got a lot to talk about when it comes to New Japan. Obviously, we're going to get into Dominion, and of course, we'll review Dynamite and Rampage as well. We got a bit of a chat on our Dark Side of the Ring coming up later as well. But I honestly think this week we've actually got to start with some New Japan stuff, and we'll start at the top. JP is coming out of Dominion. The biggest news stories coming out of that is the fallout for Forbidden Door, which we've got to talk about, as Bryan Danielson has challenged Kazuchika Okada via a video that we all saw at a Forbidden Door, and obviously with Will Ospreay winning the number one contendership tournament for the US title, beating Lance Archer. He's now primed to face Kenny Omega. That one's not quite as official yet, but basically Ospreay's promo calling out Kenny, calling out Canada. I think that kind of tells you where we are with that particular story. And straight away, just through announcing those two matches, New Japan and AEW right in the middle of the news cycle again, JP. Like, I can't tell you like how. Look, we were the gobshites last year who spent a lot of time moaning about the Forbidden Door build. We were the gobshites last year, we're like, this is shit. The state of this build, the state of this booking, the state of these dream matches we're getting. I'll still stand by the fact that we were right, JP, but we did end up with egg in our face because the show ended up being fucking amazing, probably the show of the year. And, best wrestlers in the world got in the ring and delivered. This year, it feels like New Japan and AEW are getting things right away. I mean, I know obviously last year they were snake bit with injuries and all kinds of issues that were out of their control, but already off to a better start, JV, because I don't know about you, I was saying it on the Daily Update today. If you left it at those two matches, I'd be happy. Load of undercard tags would be fine with me at this point. The rest of the card almost doesn't matter. I mean, I imagine they'll stack it with more stuff, maybe a couple more dream matches. Maybe we'll even get the Tanahashi Punk match we were promised last year. Maybe something fun like an EC Joe or something like that. But yeah, this is a hell of a start, mate. And don't often say it, but two genuine dream matches happening on this show. One being a rematch, obviously, but perfect for this card.
Absolutely perfect for this card as well. And it's going to be like an incredible atmosphere. Just seeing Danielson and Okada in the ring together, there's going to be that point where it's just going to look incredible. And I was glad as well that the announcement for these happened on Dominion and they happened in Japan, because it felt like the way that they were done were ways that you'd like them to be done. So the idea of just seeing a video of Danielson after Moxley decides, says that there's a message that he's got from someone else there for Okada. I just like the presentation of it rather than being like last year where it was Okada running to the ring to make a save, I don't know, for like best friends or something. It was just like, what the hell is this? This is just like nonsense. And like you, there's that, I'm kind of like, once I saw those first two matches, I thought, do you know what? I'm kind of fine with you leaving this as this is. I think we will get Punk Tanahashi, because I think also for a simple reason of, if Punk's going to have to come back to the ring, for someone as injury prone as he is, and you've got to say he's injury prone, Tanahashi's probably as good a bet to put in there in the ring with him for them to be able to have a professional wrestling match without it being something that requires either of them to kill themselves. And there won't be the level of pressure that these two matches have. But already you think of other stuff in the undercard. I'm less bothered now because it feels like this is kind of delivered, which, you ask the question of, is New Japan back? And I think the bigger thing is whatever happens with the booking of it. But what you can say is that they're certainly putting their best foot forward, which is something you can't say about them. They've done for quite a long time and doing some kind of big moves. And I think if nothing else, this is the buy rate for this is gonna jump. I think there's going to be a big jump for this.
Because last year we had that conversation, so it looked like it was going to be low. And to be fair to Gareth was one of the only people I saw in wrestling media being like, well, that's not acceptable because this should be a dream card. Like, it shouldn't be low. And you saw a lot of people like, New Japan, not as, known as AEW in the West and blah, 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 making excuses. And then it turned out they didn't need to make the excuses because again, despite our thoughts, the pay-per-view actually did really well last year. And it was basically in line with like the other shows. You had those two matches on top. And we saw, the news this week, it looks like, again, for the slagging off of the build of Double or Nothing, for the slagging off of the show itself, that sounds like it did. I think we found there's a very high base for AEW pay-per-views because that base seemed to have turned out for that show as well. But yeah, this one, it is genuinely a dream card. Because like for me, like I mean, Omega Ospreay, there is the question if this is the second match, is then there enough time for the third match to potentially be at Wembley? I know there are certain members of the media very much pushing that to take place. Wouldn't hate it,
No.
but we'll see whether that happens. Look, I'm not going to complain if I get to be in a building with Omega versus Ospreay, and I think as well, I think the only negative with that match was, well, it's not really an AEW match. Well, it will be now because it's taking place at Forbidden Door, and I think Ospreay will obviously known by the AEW fan base, but will be even more known by the AEW fan base coming out of this. Because although he's had some fun matches in AEW and he's had some fun spots, we had the Orange Cassidy match at Forbidden Door last year. There's been a few fun six-mans on Dynamite. I don't think he's ever really truly been established within the AEW bigger universe than New Japan, and it's fair to say that. As well as he could be, or as seriously and as much of a star as he could potentially be presented. I think this match is you're gonna have to do that. You're gonna have to sell that, that it is a genuine dream match, and Ospreay is Omega's equivalent from New Japan. And again, AEW fans are hardcore enough; they'll know that mostly, but there's still that bigger TV audience you want to please, so they're gonna be doing that. And then Danielson, Danielson Okada or Danielson Tanahashi, I would have taken. Same with Punk. You could switch those if it turned out Punk Tanahashi was on this show, next year I'd just switch those matches around and do the other two, because I'd love to see the other two as well. I think that'd be perfect for both. But tells you why Danielson hasn't been bumping. From pretty much from Revolution, he's took one bump, and that was in the Anarchy Arena match last week. He did one drop kick and one actual bump. And everything else he's done on TV has been in a mouthpiece or on commentary. I made the joke on Twitter. He's saving his head and neck bumps up for this match. I think he's maybe he knew this. I was starting to get conspiracy. We're going to talk about the G1 in a minute. I was starting to think, is he getting himself ready for a G1? I guess not. He's probably getting himself ready for this, because it's going to be prime. Danielson going out there trying to have a 5-star match for lack of a better term. Just so exciting, unbelievable.
And you think of the 4 people involved in these 2 matches and the professional kind of pride that they have in terms of trying to put on the best match. I'm genuinely thinking you could headline with either of these, and there are incredibly good arguments for both of them as well. But that's a proper couple of main events.
Definitely.
Stuff. And even with Omega Ospreay, I think the way you build that is the love of just show clips from Wrestle Kingdom. Just show extended clips from that. Make sure you can put the match up for free, possibly up on the AEW YouTube site. That type of stuff. Just get it out there of actually, if you don't know who this guy is, he's one of the best wrestlers in the world, and they're capable of they've had what could have been the match of the year at the very start of the year, and it feels like you say having this on depending on how this goes and the way that Ospreay is leaning so heavily into the anti-Canada stuff as well. Feels like it's almost setting itself up for Wembley as a kind of the final trilogy match. They could end up doing the more you think actually that they could do it and they can get away with it, because it's the quality that matters with this, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's the selling point.
I mean, what would you say, as far as the rest of the card? Is there anything you're expecting? Where does it? I suppose the big question is was it the world champions? Where do they fit? Because we already started with 2 dream matches. Do you do anything with MJF? Do you give him a match? Because it's a gimmick, isn't it, that he hates New Japan? But I always thought you could do something with him and Naito or something like that, where Naito can't be asked either, and it's a whole bit they're a tag team or something like that. I think he'll be on the show. I just don't know in what capacity type of thing. I don't know if you had any other thoughts on what else they could do.
I was thinking that as well. It goes one of 2 ways. Because last year they kind of packed it with very, very random undercard matches that all turned out to be a hell of a lot of fun. This time round, obviously, they've set the stall out with 2 singles matches. It's whether or not they're going to do the tag champions against each other again, because it's not the match they wanted to do. That was obviously FTR as the Open was the match that they wanted to do. They're not going to be able to do that. So you got Bishop on. That's a rematch, but I think you can get away with it if you wanted to do it. But I'd probably think that's the kind of MJF, the character of him to be there, slagging off those fans is the kind of easy, cheap heat that you would want as well, for him to be able to do. And I think you could do that. I like the idea of him saying, "I'm not wrestling on that. I don't wrestle on that. Like, I'm above wrestling on like Forbidden Door, and he'll kick off about people who try to do, loads of flips in their matches and the rest of it. He does play into that. In terms of Sonada, I wonder. It's a slightly more difficult one, isn't it? Because if nothing else, really, this weekend, I'd say one of the things coming out of Dominion, he's kind of overshadowed in many ways, not only by the person he was in the ring with, but the fact that he isn't the big star. He's not Will Ospreay, and he's not Naito, he's not Okada, he's not even Tanahashi to this audience. So what do you do with him? And I think, again, you can probably get away with burying him somewhere in the undercard, but it's not particularly exciting. And for an IWGP champion, you don't want to. My fear is they might end up doing some sort of 4-way match, something weird like that, where, again, if it's like last year, it was a good match for the time, but it's kind of forgettable if you ask me to kind of recall stuff. So I don't know. As part of me wants to keep the titles off it. The dream match concept might just be the simplest way to go, and MJF versus Naito would be like, that would be the kind of thing we think, I have to see this show, because if you have like at least 6 intriguing singles and tag matches there as well. If you're going to have Toni Storm, she's been calling out Stardom wrestlers as well. Is it going to be her versus a Mayu Iwatani? Like, there's interesting stuff that you can do for this.
Definitely. Yeah, it's going to be exciting. It should have been an exciting period last year. Instead, it was painful, and a lot of that was the AW book, and a lot of that was just Tony Khan struggling to handle having Forbidden Door going on at the same time as trying to keep his own storylines in check, and it was messy, wasn't it? This is a great start. Let's see the execution on AW TV coming forwards, but we're going to talk a bit more AW TV in a bit. But before that, to keep it on New Japan, the other big news coming out of Dominion JP was, and another positive, was the G1 Climax lineup. Now, you've got to say, firstly, it's way too many wrestlers. That's the negative. 32-man tournament, largest lineup of all time for the tournament of tournaments, the NJPW 1972 website says here. But as far as some of the people that are in there, like Eddie Kingston being announced for this, fucking like, sign me up for that. Like, again, Eddie Kingston should be doing more interesting things in AEW, but he's not. So he's a guy you can spare and you can have over in Japan for 6 weeks or however long it takes. Makes sense, if they've got the ROH pay-per-view coming up. I get why Claudio couldn't be in that position. It's a shame Brian isn't. I'm sure he still wants to do it, but I'll take Eddie Kingston. But there's a few fresh names in this one, JP. Kaito Kiyomiya, obviously the other big one. Plenty of story you can pay off with him being there. Don't know, you read into that one as like a political kind of thing with the way he's been booked / not booked the last while. I think last I heard he was going on holiday with Muto for WrestleMania weekend or something like that. I don't even think that didn't come to pass in the end, did it? But he's in this thing, and there's a few other names, like the younger names, your tag teams, your Mikey Nichols, people like that, the Shane Haste, there's obviously, in there you've got your young boy Bullet Club lads that are knocking around now as well, that are in there as we kind of go through the list. Like, there's some fresh names in there, depending on how they mix these groups up and how those big new names split into this. Like, I'm genuinely excited. I think it's the most wonderful time of the year, JP. Get the jingle ready. We're ready to go.
I think so. I think we're there. I mean, what do we expect? I suppose from a G1 liner, what do we kind of expect? Like, there's always the idea as well. I like the outsider, but somebody from Japan. So Yukaito Kiyomiya, which plays into obviously the kind of beef with Okada. It feels like that's a direction they're going to go in. You'd imagine he'd be pushed reasonably hard. Like, if that's a longer term direction they're going to go in for, say, next year's Wrestle Kingdom, I'm completely down with that as like a long term direction for that, because I think that ultimately will be good for him. Like, but also, like you say, there were so many years where you're thinking, all right, Yujiro, Farley, and the kind of dross has gone, and those broken down older wrestlers, you think, well, why are they in this tournament? They shouldn't be here. It's not going to add anything for it. Instead, what they've done is they've really boosted it with a lot of youth. Now, I have worries about Bullet Club kind of storylines and the rest of it coming to pass, but you have to say it's something that we've wanted, and you think, well, yeah, a Gabriel Kidd in there has such a good chance to improve. Alex Coughlin, who's waited a really long time for this as well. Yota Tsuji is a fascinating case of how hard are they going to be trying to push him on here. Ren Narita is going to be, again, interesting. He's kind of like coming to his own as well. And yeah, there are people, I'm not mad about Gorillas of Destiny being in there, but there's a lot less that I'm unhappy about as opposed to what I am happy about, which is freshness in the tournament. Yeah, it's going to be a bit too much. And in some ways, I just hope they overload the shows like they did with the best of the Super Juniors. So if you've got this idea of having, because I'm assuming it'd be 4 blocks of 8, then in that case, if it is 4 blocks of 8, just have 2 block days and like basically have it that way and make these cards long and make, because I think that worked with the best of the Super Juniors from a quality perspective. It would certainly work here. And if you think to people like a Hangman Page, who when he did a G1, it made him as a wrestler. It really fucking did. We were like pretty ambivalent. And I can remember just going, hang on a minute, he's having a cracking run here. Like, and he is getting better. And that is what happens here. There's a lot of really interesting names and interesting fresh matchups. And maybe not everything's going to click and it could be a bit of overkill, but I haven't been excited about G1 in ages. Do they get rid of some of the booking tropes from it? I don't know. Best of the Super Juniors was they turned out a lot different than what I would have expected. Titan versus Master Wata. I don't think really most people saw that one coming, but yeah, not to be excited about.